This is Doing Ethics, Moral Reasoning, Theory, and Contemporary Issues, 6th edition, Lewis Vaughn. I am reading this because the book itself is read by a robot, and I'd rather listen to myself read it. And just for anyone who wants to listen to ethics. I haven't read out loud since high school. I usually just read in my head just like anybody else, so I may stumble some words. I'm just not used to reading out loud. But I think by the end of this, I will be better at this. So yeah, hope you enjoy listening to ethics. This is mostly for my philosophy intro to ethics class. I do know my lights are messed up. I don't know why. But this is mostly just me reading the book for myself. That way I could just listen to it when I need to. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Ethics and the Examined Life. Ethics, or moral philosophy, is the philosophical study of morality. Morality refers to beliefs concerning right and wrong, good and bad, beliefs that can include judgments, values, rules, principles, and theories. These beliefs help guide our actions, define our values, and give us reasons for being the persons we are. Ethical and moral, the adjective forms, are often used to mean simply having to do with morality, and ethics and morality are sometimes used to refer to the moral norms of a specific group or individual, as in Greek ethics or Russell's morality. Ethics then addresses the powerful question that Socrates formulated 2,400 years ago. How ought we to live? The scope and continued relevance of this query suggests something compelling about ethics. You cannot escape it. You cannot run away from all the choices, feelings, and actions that accompany ideas about right and wrong, good and bad, ideas that persist in your culture and in your mind. After all, for much of your life, you have been assimilating, modifying, or rejecting the ethical norms you inherited from your family, community, and society. Unless you are very unusual, from time to time you deliberate about the rightness or wrongness of actions, embrace or reject particular moral principles or codes, judge the goodness of your character or intentions or someone else's, perhaps even question and agonize over the soundness of your own moral outlook when it conflicts with that of others. In other words, you are involved in ethics. You do ethics. Even if you try to remove yourself from the ethical realm by insisting that all ethical concepts are irrelevant or empty, you assume a particular view, a theory, in the broadest sense, about morality and its place in your life. If at some point you are intellectually brave enough to wonder whether your moral beliefs rest on some coherent supporting considerations, you will see that you cannot even begin to sort out such considerations without, again, doing ethics. In any case, in your life, you must deal with the rest of the world, which turns on moral conflict and resolution, moral decision, and debate. What is at stake when we do ethics? It's an important sense. The answer is everything we hold dear. Ethics is concerned with values, specifically moral values. Through the sifting and weighing of moral values, we determine what is the most important things in our lives, what is worth living for, and what is worth dying for. We decide what is the greatest good and what goals we should pursue in life, what virtues we should cultivate, what duties we should or should not fulfill, what value we should put on human life, and what pain and perils we should be willing to endure for notions such as the common good, justice, and rights. Does it matter whether the state executes a criminal who has the mental capacity of a 10-year-old? Does it matter who actually writes the term paper you turn in and represent as your own? Does it matter whether we can easily save a drowning child but casually decide not to? Does it matter whether young girls in Africa undergo painful genital mutilation for reasons of custom or religion? Do these actions and a million others, just as controversial, matter at all? Most of us, regardless of our opinion on these issues, would say that they matter a great deal. If they matter, then ethics matters, because these are ethical concerns requiring careful reflection using concepts and reasoning peculiar to ethics. But even though ethics is inescapable and important, you are still free to take the easy way out. And many people do. You are free not to think too deeply or too systematically about ethical concerns. You can simply embrace the moral beliefs and norms given to you by your family and your society. You can accept them without question or serious examination. In other words, you can try not to do ethics. This approach can be simple and painless, at least for a while, but it has some drawbacks. First, it undermines your personal freedom. If you accept to never question the moral beliefs handed to you by your culture, then those beliefs are not really yours. And they, not you, control the path you take in life. Only if you critically examine these beliefs yourself and decide for yourself whether they have merit, will they be truly yours. Only then will you be in charge of your own choices and actions. Third, if there is such thing as intellectual moral growth, you are unlikely to find it on the safe route. To not do ethics is to stay locked in a kind of intellectual limbo where exploration in ethics and personal moral progress is barely impossible or possible. Second, the no questions asked approach increases the chances that your responses to moral dilemmas or contradictions will be incomplete, confused, or mistaken. Sometimes in real life, moral codes or rules do not fit the situations at hand, or moral principles conflict with one another, or entirely new circumstances are not covered by any moral policy at all. Solving these problems requires something that is a hand-me-down morality, does not include the intellectual tools to critically evaluate and reevaluate existing moral beliefs. The philosopher Paul Taylor suggests that there is yet another risk in taking the easy road. If someone blindly embraces the morality bequeathed to him by his society, he may very well be a fine embodiment of the rules of his culture and accept them with certainty. But he will lack the ability to defend his beliefs by rational argument against criticism. What happens when he encounters others who also have a very strong belief that contradict his? He will feel lost and bewildered, Taylor says, and his confusion might leave him disillusioned about morality, unable to give an objective, reasoned justification for his own convictions. He may turn from dogmatic certainty to total skepticism. And from total skepticism, it is but a short step to an amoral life. Thus, the person who begins by accepting moral beliefs blindly can end up denying all morality. There are other easy roads that can also bypass critical and thoughtful scrutiny of morality. We can describe most of them as various forms of subjectivism, a topic that we examine closely in the next chapter. You may decide, for example, that you establish all your moral beliefs by simply consulting your feelings. In situations calling for moral judgments, you let your emotions be your guide. If it feels right, then it is right. Alternatively, you may come to believe that moral realities are relative to each person, a view we know as subjective relativism, also covered in the next chapter. That is, you think that what a person believes or approves of determines the rightness or wrongness of actions. If you believe that abortion is wrong, then it is wrong. If you believe it is right, then it is right. But these facile roads through ethical terrain are no better than blindly accepting existing norms. Even if you want to take the subjectivist route, you still need to examine it critically to see if there are good reasons for choosing it. Otherwise, your choice is arbitrary and therefore not really yours. And unless you thoughtfully consider the merits of moral beliefs, including subjectivist beliefs, your chances of being wrong about them are substantial. Ethics does not give us a royal road to moral truth. Instead, it shows us how to ask critical questions about morality and systematically seek answers supported by good reasons. This is a tall order because, as we have seen, many of the questions in ethics are among the toughest we can ever ask, and among the most important in life. Ethical landscape. The domain of ethics is large, divided into several areas of investigation and cordoned off from related subjects. So let us map the territory carefully. As the term moral philosophy suggests, ethics is a branch of philosophy. A very rough characterization of philosophy is a systematic use of critical reasoning to answer the most fundamental questions in life. Moral philosophy obviously tries to answer the fundamental questions of morality. The other major branches of philosophy addresses other basic questions. These branches are logic, the study of correct reasoning; metaphysics, the study of the fundamental nature of reality; and epistemology, the study of knowledge. As a division of philosophy, ethics does its work primarily through critical reasoning, the careful systematic evaluation of statements or claims. Critical reasoning is a process used in all fields of study, not just in ethics. The main components of this process are the evaluation of logical arguments and the careful analysis of concepts. Science also studies morality, but not in the way that moral philosophy does. Its approach is known as descriptive ethics, the scientific study of moral beliefs and practices. Its aim is to describe and explain how people actually behave and think when dealing with moral issues and concepts. This kind of empirical research is usually conducted by sociologists, anthropologists, and psychologists. In contrast, the focus of moral philosophy is not what people actually believe and do, but what they should believe and do. The point of moral philosophy is to determine what actions are right or wrong, and what things are good or bad. Philosophers distinguish three major divisions in ethics, each one representing a different way to approach the subject. The first division is normative ethics, the study of the principles, rules, or theories that guide our actions and judgments. The word normative refers to norms or standards of judgment, in this case, norms for judging rightness and goodness. The ultimate purpose of doing normative ethics is to try to establish the soundness of moral norms, especially the norms embodied in a comprehensive moral system, or moral theory. We do normative ethics when we use critical reasoning to demonstrate that a moral principle is justified, or that a professional code of conduct is contradictory, or that one proposed moral theory is better than the other, or that a person's motive is good. Should the rightness of actions be judged by their consequences? Is happiness the greatest good in life? Is utilitarianism a good moral theory? Such questions are the preoccupation of normative ethics. Another major division of ethics is meta-ethics, the study of the meaning and logical structure of moral beliefs. It asks whether an action is right or whether a person's character is good. It takes a step back from these concerns and asks more fundamental questions about them. What does it mean for an action to be right? Is good the same thing as desirable? How can a moral principle be justified? Is there such thing as moral truth? To do normative ethics, we must assume certain things about the meaning of moral terms and the logical relationships among them. But the job of metaethics is to question all of these assumptions to see if they really make sense. Finally, there is applied ethics. The application of moral norms to specific moral issues or cases, particularly those in a profession such as medicine or law. Applied ethics in these fields go under names such as medical ethics, journalistic ethics, and business ethics. In applied ethics, we study the results derived from applying a moral principle or theory to specific circumstances. The purpose of the exercise is to learn something important about either the moral characteristics of the situation or the adequacy of the moral norms. Did the doctor do the right thing in performing that abortion? Is it morally permissible for scientists to perform experiments on people without their consent? Was it right for the journalist to distort her reporting to aid a particular side in the war? Questions like these drive the search for answers in applied ethics. In every division of ethics, we must be careful to distinguish between values and obligations. Sometimes we may be interested in concepts or judgments of value, that is, about what is morally good, bad, blameworthy, or praiseworthy. We properly use these kinds of terms to refer mostly to persons, character traits, motives, and intentions. We may say, she is a good person, or he is to blame for that tragedy. At other times, we may be interested in concepts or judgments of obligation, that is, about what is obligatory or a duty or what we should or ought to do. We use these terms to refer to actions. We may say, she has a duty to tell the truth, or what he did was wrong. We talk about value in the sense just described. We mean moral value. If she's a good person, she's good in the moral sense. But we can also talk about non-moral value. We can say things such as televisions, rockets, experiences, and works of art, things that other person's intentions and so forth are good, but we mean good only in a non-moral way. It makes sense to assert that televisions or rockets themselves are morally good or bad. Perhaps a rocket could be used to perform an action that is morally wrong. In that case, the action would be immoral, while the rocket itself would still have only non-moral value. Many things in life have value for us, but they are not necessarily valuable in the same way. Some things are valuable because they are a means to something else. We might say that gasoline is good because it is a means to make a gas-powered vehicle work, or that a pen is good because it can be used to write a letter. Such things are said to be instrumentally or extrinsically valuable. They are valuable as a means to something else. Some things, however, are valuable for their own sakes. They are valuable simply because they are what they are without being a means to something else. Things that have been regarded as valuable in themselves include happiness, pleasure, virtue, and beauty. These things are said to be intrinsically valuable. They are valuable in themselves. Elements of ethics. We all do ethics, and we all have a general sense of what is involved. But we can still ask, what are the elements of ethics that make it the peculiar enterprise that it is? We can include at least the following factors. Preeminence of reason. Doing ethics typically involves grappling with our feelings, taking into account the facts of the situation, including our own observations and relevant knowledge, and trying to understand the ideas that bear on the case. But above all, it even requires critical reasoning. The consideration of reasons for whatever statements, moral or otherwise, are in question. Whatever our view on moral issues and whatever moral outlook we subscribe to, our common sense moral experience suggests that if a moral judgment is to be worthy of acceptance, it must be supported by good reasons. And our deliberations on the issue must include a consideration of those reasons. The backbone of critical reasoning generally and moral reasoning in particular is logical argument. This kind of argument, not the angry exchange type, consists of a statement to be supported, the assertion to be proved, the conclusion, and the statements that do the supporting, the reasons for believing the statement, the premises. With such arguments, we try to show that a moral judgment is or is not justified, that a moral principle is or is not sound, that an action is or is not morally permissible, or that a moral theory is or is not plausible. Review of terms. Ethics or moral philosophy is the philosophical study of morality. Morality is the beliefs concerning right and wrong, good and bad. They can include judgments, values, rules, principles, and theories. Descriptive ethics is the scientific study of moral beliefs and practices. Normative ethics is the study of the principles, rules, or theories that guide our actions and judgments. Metaethics is the study of the meaning and logical structure of moral beliefs. Applied ethics is the application of moral norms to specific moral issues or cases, particularly those in a profession such as medicine or law. Instrumentally or extrinsically valuable is valuable as a means to something else. Intrinsically valuable is valuable in itself for its own sake. Our use of critical reasoning and argument helps us keep our feelings about moral issues in perspective. Feelings are an important part of our moral experience. They make empathy possible, which gives us a deeper understanding of the human impact of moral norms. They can also serve as an internal alarm bells, warning us of the possibility of injustice, suffering, and wrongdoing. But they are unreliable guides to moral truth. They may simply reflect our own emotional needs, prejudices, upbringing, culture, and self-interests. Careful reasoning, however, can inform our feelings and help us decide moral questions on their merits. Universal perspective. Logic requires that moral norms and judgments follow the principle of universality, the idea that a moral statement, a principle, rule, or judgment that applies in one situation must apply in all other situations that are relevantly similar. If you say, for example, that lying is wrong in a particular situation, then you implicitly agree that lying is wrong for anyone in relevantly similar situations. If you say that killing in self-defense is morally permissible, then you say, in effect, that killing in self-defense is permissible for anyone in relevantly similar situations. It cannot be the case that an action performed by A is wrong, while the same action performed by B in relevantly similar circumstances is right. It cannot be the case that the moral judgments formed in these two situations must differ just because two different people are involved. This point about universality also applies to reasons used to support moral judgments. If reasons apply in a specific case, then those reasons also apply in relevantly similar cases. It cannot be true that reasons that apply in a specific case do not apply to other cases that are similar in all relevant aspects. The principle of impartiality. From the moral point of view, all persons are considered equal and should be treated accordingly. This sense of impartiality is implied in all moral statements. It means that the welfare and interests of each individual should be given the same weight as the welfare and interest of all others. Unless there is a morally relevant difference between people, we should treat them the same. We must treat equals equally. We would think it outrageous for a moral rule to say something like, everyone must refrain from stealing food in grocery stores, except for Mr. X, who may steal all he wants. Imagine that there is no morally relevant reason for making this exception for stealing food. Mr. X is exempted merely because, say, he is a celebrity known for outrageous behavior. We not only would object to this rule, but might even begin to wonder if it was a genuine moral rule at all, because it lacks impartiality. Similarly, we would reject a moral rule that says something like, everyone is entitled to basic human rights except Native Americans. Such a rule would be a prime example of discrimination based on race. We can see this blatant partiality best if we ask what a morally relevant difference there is between Native Americans and everyone else. Differences in income, social status, skin color, ancestry, and the like are not morally relevant. Apparently, there are no moral relevant differences. Because there are none, we must conclude that the rule sanctions unfair discrimination. We must keep in mind, however, that sometimes there are good reasons for treating someone differently. Imagine a hospital that generally gives equal care to patients, treating equals equally. But suppose a patient comes to the hospital in an ambulance because she has had a heart attack and will die without immediate care. The hospital staff responds quickly, giving her faster and more sophisticated care than other patients receive. The situation is a matter of life or death, a good reason for not treating everyone the same and for providing the heart attack patient with special consideration. This instance of discrimination is justified. Dominance of moral norms. Not all norms are moral norms. There are legal norms, laws, statutes, aesthetic norms for judging artistic creations, prudential norms, practical considerations of self-interest, and others. Moral norms seem to stand out from all of these in an interesting way. They dominate. Whenever moral principles or values conflict in some way with non-moral principles or values, the moral considerations usually override the others. Moral considerations seem more important, more critical, and more weighty. A principle of prudence, such as never help a stranger, may be well justified, but it must yield to any moral principle that contradicts it, such as help a stranger in an emergency if you can do it without endangering yourself. An aesthetic norm that somehow involved violating a moral principle would have to take a backseat to the moral considerations. A law that conflicted with a moral principle would be suspect, and the latter would have to prevail over the former. Ultimately, the justification for civil disobedience is that specific laws conflict with moral norms and are therefore invalid. If we judge a law to be bad, we usually do so on moral grounds. Religion and morality. Many people believe that morality and religion are inseparable, that religion is the source or basis of morality, and that moral precepts are simply what God says should be done. This view is not at all surprising because all religions imply or assert a perspective on morality. The three great religions in Western tradition, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, provide their believers with commandments or principles of conduct that are taught to constitute the moral law, the essence of morality. For their millions of adherents, the moral law is the will of God, and the will of God is the moral law. In the West, at least, the powerful imprint of religion is evident in secular laws and in the private morality of believers and unbelievers alike. Secular systems of morality, for example, those of the ancient Greek philosophers Immanuel Kant, the utilitarians, and others, have, of course, left their mark on Western ethics. But they have not moved to the millions who think that morality is a product exclusively of religion. So what is the relationship between religion and morality? For our purposes, we should break this question into two parts. 1. What is the relationship between religion and ethics, the philosophical study of morality? And 2. What is the relationship between religion and morality, beliefs about right and wrong? The first question asks about how religion relates to the kind of investigation we conduct in this book. The use of experience and critical reasoning to study morality. The key point about the relationship is that whatever your views on religion and morality, an open-minded expedition into ethics is more useful and empowering than you may realize, especially now at the beginning of your journey into moral philosophy. You may believe, for example, that God determines what is right and wrong, so there is no need to apply critical reasoning to your morality. You just need to know what God says, but this judgment and similar dismissals of ethics would be premature, as we will see. Believers need moral reasoning. It is difficult, perhaps impossible, for most people to avoid using moral reasoning. Religious people are no exception. One reason is that religious moral codes such as the Ten Commandments and other major religious rules of conduct are usually vague, laying out general principles that may be difficult to apply to specific cases. Secular moral codes have the same disadvantage. For example, we may be commanded to love our neighbor, but what neighbors are included? People of a different religion? People who denounce our religion, the gay or lesbian couple, those who steal from us, the convicted child molester next door, the drug dealers on the corner, the woman who got an abortion. Also, what does loving our neighbor demand of us? How does love require us to behave towards the drug dealers, the gay couple, or the person who denounces our religion? If our terminally ill neighbor asks us in the name of love to help him kill himself, what should we do? Does love require us to kill him or to refrain from killing him? And of course, commandments can conflict as when, for example, the only way to avoid killing an innocent person is to tell a lie, or the only way to save the life of one person is to kill another. All these situations force the believer to interpret religious directives to try to apply general rules to specific cases, to draw out the implications of particular views, in other words, to do ethics. When conflicts arise, ethics steps in. Very often, moral contradictions or inconsistencies confront the religious believer, and only moral reasoning can help resolve them. Believers sometimes disagree with their religious leaders on moral issues. Adherents of one religious tradition may disagree with those from another tradition on whether the act is right or wrong. Sincere devotees in a religious tradition may wonder if its moral teachings make sense. In all such cases, intelligent resolution of the conflict of moral claims can be achieved only by applying a neutral standard that helps sort out the competing viewpoints. Moral philosophy supplies a neutral standard in the form of critical thinking, well-made arguments, and careful analysis. No wonder then that many great religious minds, Aquinas, Leibniz, Descartes, Kant, Maimonides, Averroes, and others, have relied on reason to examine the nature of morality. In fact, countless theists have regarded the reason as a gift from God that enables human beings to grasp the truths of science, life, and morality. Moral philosophy enables productive discourse. Any fruitful discussions about morality undertaken between people from different religious traditions or between believers and non-believers will require a common set of ethical concepts and a shared procedure for deciding issues and making judgments. Ethics provides these tools. Without them, conversations will resolve nothing, and participants will learn little. Without them, people will talk past each other, appealing only to their own religious views. Furthermore, in a pluralistic society, most of the public discussions about important moral issues take place in a context of shared values such as justice, fairness, equality, and tolerance. Just as important, they also occur according to an unwritten understanding that 1. Moral positions should be explained, 2. Claims should be supported by reasons, and 3. Reasoning should be judged by common rational standards. These skills, of course, are at the heart of ethics. Now, consider the second question introduced above. What is the relationship between religion and morality? For many people, the most interesting query about the relationship between religion and morality is this: is God the maker of morality? That is God the author of the moral law? Those who answer yes are endorsing a theory of morality known as the divine command theory. It says that right actions are those that are willed by God, that God literally defines right and wrong. Something is right or good only because God makes it so. In the simplest version of the theory, God can determine right and wrong because he is omnipotent. He is all-powerful, powerful enough to create moral norms. In this view, God is a divine lawgiver, and his laws constitute morality.
According to a report by CNN, Jack and Lisa Nash made history when they used genetic testing to save the life of their 6-year-old daughter, Molly, by having another child. Molly had a rare genetic disorder known as Fanconi anemia, which prevents the generation of bone marrow and produces a fatal leukemia. Molly's best chance to live was to get a transplant of stem cells from the umbilical cord of a sibling. And Molly's parents were determined to give her that sibling, brother Adam, through genetic testing and in vitro fertilization. Jack and Lisa were able to select a child who would not only be born without a particular disease, Fanconi anemia in this case, but also would help a sibling combat the disease by being the optimal tissue match for a transplant. A historic combination, as Lisa Nash said. I was going to save Molly no matter what, and I wanted Molly to have siblings.
Is it right to produce a child to save the life or health of someone else? More to the point, do the scriptures of the three major Western religions provide any guidance on this question? Do any of these traditions offer useful methods for productively discussing or debating such issues with people of different faiths? How might ethics help with these challenges? Is it possible to formulate a reasonable opinion on this case without doing ethics? Why or why not? In general, believers are divided on whether the divine command theory gives an accurate account of the source of morality. Notable among the theory's detractors are the great theistic philosophers Gottfried Leibniz and Thomas Aquinas. And conversely, as odd as they may sound, some non-believers have subscribed to it. In the Brothers Karamazov, the character Ivan Karamazov declares, "If God doesn't exist, everything is permissible." This very sentiment was espoused by, among others, the famous atheist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Both religious and secular critics of the divine command theory believe that it poses a serious dilemma, one first articulated by Socrates 2.5 millennia ago. The dialogue Euthyphro, Socrates asks, "Is an action morally right because God wills it to be so? Or does God will it to be so because it is morally right?" Critics say that if an action is right only because God wills it, that is, if right and wrong are dependent on God, then many heinous crimes and evil actions would be right if God willed them. If God willed murder, theft, or torture, these deeds would be morally right. If God has unlimited power, he could easily will such actions. If the rightness of an action depended on God's will alone, he could not have reasons for willing what he wills. No reasons would be available or required. Therefore, if God commanded an action, the command would be without reason, completely arbitrary. Neither the believer nor the non-believer would think this state of affairs is plausible. On the other hand, if God wills an action because it is morally right, if moral norms are independent of God, then the divine command theory must be false. God does not create rightness. He simply knows what is right and wrong and is subject to the moral law just as humans are. For some theists, this charge of arbitrariness is especially worrisome. Leibniz, for example, rejects the divine command theory, declaring that it implies that God is unworthy of worship. In saying, therefore, that things are not good according to any standard of goodness, but simply by the will of God, it seems to me that one destroys without realizing it all the love of God and all his glory, for why praise him for what he has done if he would be equally praiseworthy in doing the contrary? Where will be his justice and his wisdom if he has only a certain despotic power? If arbitrary will takes the place of reasonableness, and if in accord with the definition of tyrants, justice consists in that which is pleasing to the most powerful. Defenders of the divine command theory may reply to the arbitrariness argument by contending that God would never command us to commit heinous acts, because God is all good. Because of his supreme goodness, he would will only what is good. Some thinkers, however, believe that such reasoning renders the very idea of God's goodness meaningless. As one philosopher says, on this view, the doctrine of the goodness of God is reduced to nonsense. It is important to religious believers that God is not only all-powerful and all-knowing, but that he is also good. Yet, if we accept the idea that good and bad are defined by reference to God's will, this notion is deprived of any meaning. What could it mean to say that God's commands are good? If X is good, then X is commanded by God. then God's commands are good. Would mean only God's commands are commanded by God, an empty truism. In any case, it seems that through critical reasoning we can indeed learn much about morality and the moral life. After all, there are complete moral systems, some of which are examined in this book, that are not based on religion, that contain genuine moral norms indistinguishable from those embraced by religion, and that are justified not by reference to religious precepts, but by careful thinking and moral arguments. As the philosopher Jonathan Berg says, those who would refuse to recognize as adequately justified any moral beliefs not derived from knowledge of or about God would have to refute the whole vast range of arguments put by Kant and all others who ever proposed a rational basis for ethics. Moreover, if we can do ethics, if we can use critical reasoning to discern moral norms certified by the best reasons and evidence, then critical reasoning is sufficient to guide us to moral standards and values. We obviously can do ethics, as the following chapters will demonstrate. So, morality is both accessible and meaningful to us whether we are religious or not. This is the chapter review. Summary. Ethics is the philosophical study of morality, and morality consists of beliefs concerning right and wrong, good and bad. These beliefs can include judgments, principles, and theories. Participating in the exploration of morality, that is, doing ethics, is inescapable. We all must make moral judgments, assess moral norms, judge people's characters, and question the soundness of our moral outlooks. A great deal is at stake when we do ethics, including countless decisions that determine the quality of our lives. You can decide to forego any ethical deliberations and simply embrace the moral beliefs and norms you inherited from your family and culture, but this approach undermines your freedom. For if you accept without question whatever moral beliefs come your way, they are not really yours. Only if you critically examine them for yourself are they truly yours. The three main divisions of ethics proper are normative ethics, the study of the moral norms that guide our actions and judgments; metaethics, the study of the meaning and logical structure of moral beliefs; and applied ethics, the application of moral norms to specific moral issues or cases. Ethics involves a distinctive set of elements. These include the preeminence of reason, the universal perspective, the principle of impartiality, and the dominance of moral norms. Some people claim that morality depends on God, a view known as the divine command theory. Both theists and non-theists have raised doubts about this doctrine. The larger point is that doing ethics using critical reasoning to examine the moral life can be useful and productive enterprise for believer and non-believer alike. From What is the Socratic Method? By Christopher Phillips. The Socratic method is a way to seek truths by your own lights. It is a system, a spirit, a method, a type of philosophical inquiry, an intellectual technique, all rolled into one. Socrates himself never spelled out a method. However, the Socratic method is named after him because Socrates, more than any other before or since, models for us philosophy practiced. Philosophy as deed, as way of living, as something that any of us can do. It is an open system of philosophical inquiry that allows one to interrogate from many vantage points. Gregory Vlastus, a Socrates scholar and professor of philosophy at Princeton, described Socrates' method of inquiry as among the greatest achievements of humanity. Why? Because he says it makes philosophical inquiry a common human enterprise, open to every man. Instead of requiring allegiance to a specific philosophical viewpoint or analytic technique or specialized vocabulary, the Socratic method calls for common sense and common speech. And this, he says, is as it should be, for how many should live is every man's business. Think, however, that the Socratic method goes beyond Vlas's description. It does not merely call for common sense, but examines what common sense is. The Socratic method asks, does the common sense of our day offer us the greatest potential for self-understanding and human excellence? Or is prevailing common sense, in fact, a roadblock to realizing this potential? Vlastus goes on to say that Socratic inquiry is by no means simple and calls not only for the highest degree of mental alertness of which anyone is capable, but also for moral qualities of high order, sincerity, humility, and courage. Such qualities protect against the possibility that Socratic dialogue, no matter how rigorous, would merely grind out wild conclusions with irresponsible premises. I agree, though I would replace the quality of sincerity with honesty, since one can hold a conviction sincerely without examining it, while honesty would require that one subject one's convictions to frequent scrutiny. A Socratic dialogue reveals how different our outlooks can be on concepts we use every day. It reveals how our philosophies are, and often how tenable or unattainable, as the case may be, a range of philosophies can be. Moreover, even the most universally recognized and used concept, when subjected to Socratic scrutiny, might reveal not only that there is not universal agreement after all on the meaning of any given concept, but that every single person has a somewhat different take on each and every concept under the sun. What's more, there seems to be no such thing as a concept so abstract or a question so off base that it can't be fruitfully explored using the Socratic method. In the course of Socratizing, it often turns out to be the case that some of the most so-called abstract concepts are intimately related to the most profoundly relevant human experiences. In fact, it's been my experience that virtually any question can be plumbed Socratically. Sometimes you don't know what question will have the most lasting and significant impact until you take the risk and delve into it for a while. What distinguishes the Socratic method from the non-systematic inquiry is the sustained attempt to explore the ramifications of certain opinions and then offer compelling objections and alternatives. This scrupulous and exhaustive form of inquiry in many ways resembles the scientific method. But unlike Socratic inquiry, scientific inquiry would often lead us to believe that whatever is not measurable cannot be investigated. This belief fails to address such paramount human concerns as sorrow and joy, and suffering and love. Instead of focusing on the outer cosmos, Socrates focused primarily on human beings and their cosmos within, utilizing his method to open up new realms of self-knowledge while at the same time exposing a great deal of error, superstition, and dogmatic nonsense. Spanish-born American philosopher and poet George Santayana said that Socrates knew that the foreground of human life is necessarily moral and practical, and that it is so even so for artists. And even for scientists, try as some might to divorce their work from these dimensions of human existence. Scholars call Socrates' method the Elenkis, which is Hellenistic Greek for inquiry or cross-examination. But it is not just any type of inquiry or examination. It is a type that reveals people to themselves, that makes them see what their opinions really amount to. C.D.C. Reeve, professor of philosophy at Reed College, gives a standard explanation of elenchus in saying that its aim is not simply to reach adequate definitions of such things as virtues. Rather, it also has a moral reformatory purpose. For Socrates believes that regular elenchic philosophizing makes people happier and more virtuous than anything else. Indeed, philosophizing is so important for human welfare. On his view that he is willing to accept execution rather than to give up. Socrates' method of examination can indeed be a vital part of existence, but I would not go so far as to say that it should be. And I do not think that Socrates felt that habitual use of this method makes people happier. The fulfillment that comes from Socratizing comes only at a price. It could well make us unhappier, more uncertain, more troubled, as well as more fulfilled. It can leave us with a sense that we don't know the answers after all, that we are much further from knowing the answers than we'd ever realized before engaging in Socratic discourse. And this is fulfilling and exhilarating and humbling and perplexing. There is no neat divide between one's views of philosophy and of life. They are overlapping and kindred views. It is virtually impossible in many instances to know what we believe in daily life until we engage others in dialogue. Likewise, to discover our philosophical views, we must engage with ourselves, with the lives we already led. Our views form, change, evolve as we participate in this dialogue. It's the only way truly to discover what philosophical colors we sail under. Everyone at some point preaches to himself and others what he does not yet practice. Everyone acts in or on the world in ways that are in some way contradictory or inconsistent with the views they confess or profess to hold. For instance, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the influential founder of existentialism, put Socratic principles to use in writing his dissertation on the concept of irony in Socrates, often using pseudonyms so he could argue his own positions with himself. In addition, the 16th century essayist Michel de Montaigne, who was called the French Socrates and was known as the father of skepticism in modern Europe, would write and add conflicting and even contradictory passages in the same work. And like Socrates, he believed the search for truth was worth dying for. The Socratic method forces people to confront their own dogmatism, according to Leonard Nelson, a German philosopher who wrote on such subjects as ethics and theory of knowledge until he was forced by the rise of Nazism to quit. By doing so, participants in Socratic dialogue are in effect forcing themselves to be free, Nelson maintains. But they're not just confronted with their own dogmatism. In the course of a Socratic dialogue, they may be confronted with an array of hypotheses, convictions, conjectures, and theories offered by the other participants and themselves, all of which subscribe to some sort of dogma. The Socratic method requires that honestly and openly, rationally and imaginatively, they confront the dogma by asking such questions as, what does this mean? What speaks for and against it? Are there alternative ways of considering it that are even more plausible and tenable? At certain junctures of a Socratic dialogue, the forcing that this confrontation entails, the insistence that each participant carefully articulate her singular philosophical perspective can be upsetting. But that is all to the good. It never touches any nerves. If it doesn't upset, if it doesn't mentally and spiritually challenge and perplex in a wonderful and exhilarating way, it is not Socratic dialogue. This forcing, opens us up to the varieties of experiences of others, whether through direct dialogue or through other means like drama or books or through a work of art or a dance. It compels us to explore alternative perspectives, asking what might be said for or against each.